What is going on? Welcome back to the shop. It's snowing out tonight. It's Monday night. I got a bunch of stuff done today and I figured why not jump back on the twin superchargers and get some stuff done. I did make a little bit of progress after the first video. I got a short Chevy water pump installed on it, got some pulleys figured out. I also pulled my upper intake off here and got everything welded on the top half, all welded down, bolted up, ready to go. I did make a couple of gussets here. I got to cut them out yet. They're over on the bench, marked out on a piece of plate. I did cut those out so I can gusset from underneath the snout on the blower back to the intake down and attach it off to the runners on the intake here yet. So I'm going to be cutting those out tonight, welding those up. I got some flange parts cut for the back of the blowers that I'm going to weld right on here, and then weld a bolt flange on top where I can bolt my upper intake on for the carburetor. I also got my pop-off plate here put on and the hole cut behind it for safety in case I get a backfire or anything. I got my bolts threaded in here. There's going to be a spring on the bolt here, some type of spring of whatever kind, gasket in between, and that way if I ever get a backfire, that plate will pop off. Should allow basically the explosion of intake gases to blow out there, and hopefully not blow the intake right off the top of the manifold or crack any of my welds. So I did make quite a bit of progress. Tonight I'm going to try to finish up the rest of that top section for the carburetor, and after that I'm basically down to getting my drive pulleys on. I did buy a small alternator for it. Got to make some alternator brackets that work with that water pump pulley and the crank. Make that. The car I'm putting it in does not need power steering, so that's going to be it. Finish the top for the carburetor, get my belt system set up, alternator, and I'm ready to swap this over to a good engine. This one's junk. Swap it over to a good engine and put it in the car. So I'm going to start making some of these parts here. I got my flanges cut out here. These are the ones that are going to get welded on the back of the blower. And I got two marked out here. These are the gussets for the front of that intake. So I'm going to cut these out first, get them cleaned up, get the TIG out, and start welding a bunch of stuff together on it. So surprisingly, these superchargers welded pretty nice. They soaked that aluminum in quite well. There was only one spot where I had some porosity, which is kind of crazy because I mean these things were pretty gas soaked, I should say. You know, just from being on the intakes for so many years. They were used off running cars. This corner got a little funky, but the rest of it laid in really nice. So I got some good welds on the inside, and then on the outside it really welded nice. These castings really soaked it up good, and I'm pretty happy with that. So next step here is going to be building my top plate or lower plate for the upper intake. I got these flanges tacked on, and if I get my straight edge, you can see that they are pretty much perfectly level with this bolt hole here. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to make one big plate that covers these and lay out these holes, all 8 of these holes in these flanges back here, lay these holes out in them, and lay these holes out as well. Once I make that plate, I can bolt everything together, put all 8 bolts here, bolt them to the top of the superchargers, and that's going to keep me at one plane across the top. After that, I can start cutting all my pieces and parts for the inlets on the superchargers, and then get all that tacked together, and then put my, I think I'm going to go 1 inch tall on the intake. Once that lower plate's on, I think 1 inch tall, and then I'll put another cap on top of that, and then the carburetor is going to sit up here in the middle. So I'll get all of that stuff tacked together, and after that, then I'll start stitching here and there, getting everything welded up, and that's pretty much going to take care of the whole induction system on this thing. So I'm going to get some paper, make a template for that, get it laid out, go to the back, transfer it out into some aluminum, get the holes drilled, bolt all this stuff together, and start making the rest of the parts to finish this thing off. Alright, well, this is the base plate of my upper plenum. I got all my bolt holes laid out. These are the ones for the superchargers to bolt it down there. I got everything laid out for my inlet flanges. And this here is actually the carburetor base plate. I just traced a gasket out for my hole and for my bolt pattern for that. This will not be cut on the base. This is going to be cut on the top plate for the upper plenum. So basically, none of this will be cut out, but these holes will be drilled and everything for the inlets. Once that's done, I can bolt that all on the blowers and the plates. That'll plane everything out, line it up. I can cut all my pieces for the inlet on the back, tack them all together. That's going to hold everything in place. After that, my upper intake is going to be 1 inch tall. So I'm going to cut some 1 inch strips, weld them off to the top of this plate, and then cap it again. And then that plate will have this pattern cut out for the carburetor, the bolt holes and the center hole for that gasket. Also, the top plate's going to be a little bit smaller than this. It's not going to follow the exact same design. I want to be able to access my bolt holes here. So really, when I get in to do the top plate, I'm going to use the same template, but I'm just going to cut it down for the top plate. I'm probably going to be somewhere in here. It'll be like this. This is where my 1 inch material is going to come up. Obviously, close across the back. Looking through the camera so I can't draw straight. Close across the back, same over here. And then it's going to end up coming probably, you know, up to the front here and then way over, totally skipping this hole. This hole will be exposed. This will be a 1 inch piece coming up. I'll get over to here, come forward. Like I said, I'm looking through the camera, so I'm drawing all ridiculous. And then that'll be a 1 inch coming up. Wherever I lay that out, then I will cut another that top plate out of another piece of 1/4 inch here, or 3/16. And that'll lay on top, and then that return will fill in the void around it. So this area here will be exposed, just one plate with a bolt in it, same over here, and then I'll be able to access all 4 of these bolts on each intake flange on the back. So I'm going to go ahead, I already transferred this out, I'm going to go ahead and get this cut out, get my holes drilled, get this bolted down on top, get everything planed out, and go from there. Base plate for my upper plenum is on. Everything's on one plane now. Everything pulled really nice and tight on the bottom flanges. Next step's going to be doing my inlets down here, sealing all that up, getting it tacked together, laying out how I want my top plate to be on here, cutting my 1 inch strips, laying them out in that pattern for the top plate, cutting the top plate with the hole and the bolt hole pattern for the carburetor. Once that's all tacked up, I can stitch everything together, take my time, try not to warp it, and that's going to pretty much wrap up the whole induction part of this project. on. I got all my marks laid out for my upper plenum here. You can see it's going to come around the back holes here and then come up on the inside of the bolt so I can still access them, and then run up to the front here, and then along the front edge, and my carb's going to end up sitting here. I already bent up this back piece. Going to sit on here. I'm going to get the TIG out and tack it along my lines where I have it all laid out. I'll have plenty of clearance for these bolts, and then I'm going to make this front piece in a separate section up here from there forward and back. And after that, then I can make a template of this, or cut down my existing template here for my top piece that's going to end up going on top of this and getting welded off up here. I'll also have to put that carburetor hole in at that point in time. Decided to just go with the 1/4 inch. I'm going to pull it off, flip it over, and over here on the table I got 4 solid aluminum blocks cut, ready to go. I'm going to get them on the bottom, centered out over the holes, weld them on, drill through those blocks, tap them for 5/16, throw the top plate back on, and finish welding this thing up. Well, I just bolted this carb spacer on here. It's a nice thick 1-inch spacer that's going to help hold everything true while I'm welding around the outsides of it. It's also probably about going to be the height of the spacer I'm going to need to set the carburetor on for my linkage to clear. Everything's looking pretty good. I got my blocks welded underneath and tapped. I'll probably end up putting studs in here and sealing the threads, and then just coming up through the top with studs when it gets final assembled. But there we go. It's all ready to weld down. So this thing's looking pretty badass. I got the carburetor sitting on top now, looking pretty good. I kind of figured in the car I'm going to put it in, I kind of figured the hood's going to be about right here on the pulley, so I'm going to be a good 10 inches out right now, sticking out of the hood. I got everything tacked up on the top plate, stitched where I can. I got to, do all my finish welding, go all the way around everything. Inlets are all done, ready to roll, and there's only one thing left missing from this that I was planning on doing, and I'm going to get that done right now and wrap up all the fabrication for the entire induction system on this thing. sums up the rest of the building of the top section of this whole deal. The next project's going to be going on to the pulley system and all that, but everything is mocked up now. I got my Mad Max hood scoop on there, oversized a little bit so I can fit a decent sized element in there so it can breathe. Everything else is tacked together, ready to be fully welded. Looking pretty good. So I'm going to leave this video at that, guys. I'm going to weld all that off camera. The next time you see this thing, I will have all that stuff welded up. I'm going to order a couple rebuild kits for the superchargers and some new couplers. And then next time we'll go on and get the belt drive done, alternator mounted and all that stuff. And it's pretty much going to be ready to bring the car down here then. I got a block at home. I got to pull the heads off the car that I'm putting it in, put the heads on the new block. Probably put a cam in it, and then we're going to set all this stuff on top of the new motor and get it in the car. Till next time.